now to Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. I mean, he's come out fighting, and there are some of us who've known Nigel a long time and saw he used to be quite pugnacious and quite strong back in the UKIP leader days. And he was sort of looking at his approach as reform leader and thinking, oh, he's gone a bit soft, but oh, not anymore. He's taken a leaf out of Trump's book and he's going after Auntie. What do you have to say about that, Trev?
Well, I think that Nigel has learned long ago, and the Labour Party and the BBC should have picked up by now, that there's no such thing as bad publicity. I mean, just look at the opinion polls. I suspect this will simply see another surge in support for reform.
I think you're right. And when I look at the provenance of these sorts of remarks, where they come from, how they get fed to journalists, I was speaking to a good friend of mine the other day, who is from the Jewish community, very politically engaged. A lot of his friends from the Jewish community are politically engaged. And the sort of sentiment was very much that once upon a time they gave to the Labour Party, because the Labour Party said, we're the party to represent you, we will stand up for you. And they look at the current state of Britain and they're looking at the sort of things that Reform is standing for and saying, that's where we want to put our money, basically. And I have a feeling that a lot of this stuff stems from the Labour Party conference, where the Labour Party took a very deliberate decision to turn that whole conference largely into a performative act of attacking Nigel Farage. Then all of a sudden some guy comes out of nowhere who went to, school with Nigel and claims that he can remember everything as if his brain is a voice recorder. And I think that there's usually, if you follow narratives, there's usually a political decision that's been made behind all of this. But it isn't going to work, is it? Because they can try and scare people off from Reform as much as possible. And we've now found that Reform are getting a donation of £9 million from just one person, Christopher Harborne.
Yes, and from what I've heard, there is a lot more money waiting, poised, ready to go into the Reform operation from other donors who have yet to actually make their steps public. And I think that you made a very good point earlier about the antecedents of some of our leading Labour lights. I mean, Keir Starmer was long a supporter of the Palestinian movement, the pro-Gaza movement, and so, of course, was Jeremy Corbyn, who in his misspent youth went on a motorbike with a pillion passenger Diane Abbott around Czechoslovakia when it was still a Soviet satellite state. Jack Jones, the leader of the Transport and General Workers, the predecessor of Unison, was a paid-up member of the KGB. And there are plenty of other examples like that right through the Labour movement. Michael Foot had associations with the KGB, although he wasn't a paid spy. But, these smears can easily be launched both directions, and the Labour Party should be very careful before it goes down that route.
And what is phenomenal, actually, at the moment is the fact that the Labour Party, if some of them have been trained at the feet of Soviet spies, they seem to be showing that training off to quite some degree, in my opinion. I mean, they've gone after agriculture. We have 6 days left of surplus, which is a nightmare. The outbreak of World War II, we had 6 weeks of self-sufficiency in terms of food supplies. They're chucking concrete down our oil wells. If we did that to another nation, that would be considered an act of sabotage. It'd be considered terrorism, probably. When you look at all the egregious things they've done, putting people into prison for tweets, messing about with the justice system, they're on such a roll. Nothing's holding them back. They're now up to cancelling elections again.
Well, I think they've got to the stage that they know they're not going to win the next election. And not in any, we'd have to have a catastrophe on the right of politics and an amazing coalition on the left to keep them in power. So I think that they don't care anymore. I think that they are doing what they've always wanted to do. And although the Prime Minister is denying it, I think we're edging backwards into the European Union. And as soon as Keir Starmer utters denial, it's true. The hallmark of this government from the very beginning, day one, has been deceit and ruthless and unscrupulous lying and cheating on every promise they've made and on every promise they've concealed until too late.
Oh, yeah, no, a lot of people think they're just chaotic and not very good. I think they're very good, and I think they're very dangerous. We do have to say what the government have said about cancelling the mayoral elections. Not all mayoral elections, elections in certain parts of the country. Reform, again, held the press conference largely about that because they were looking forward to standing candidates in elections due to take place in May in Essex, in Hampshire and the Solent, Sussex and Brighton, and Norfolk and Suffolk. Basically, what the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government have turned around and said is, we want to allow for a meaningful period of time between the establishment of the strategic authority and mayoral elections. Therefore, the government is minded to hold these inaugural mayoral elections for Sussex and Brighton, etc. So these areas have the opportunity to conclude their local government reorganisation and build strong, effective unitaries, which is what we want to see, and to establish their strategic authority before the mayor takes post. Very convenient there. We're doing what is right. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do, as they will tell us. And a number 10 spokesman, our plans for greater devolution will put power into the hands of those who know their communities best. Today, we've announced the next step in that plan with confirmation of an annual £200 million pot in 6 regions with fast tracking for these changes, which will go towards projects and upgrades that matter most to these communities. That money will be spent on what the areas want most and could include boosting local house building schemes, transforming high streets or funding skills programmes. How very nice. You still aborted a plebiscite. Dictators do that.
I think that what we're seeing is a variation of the old slogan. This one is democracy delayed is democracy denied. And so we're not going to get what we want, which is a chance to tell this government what we really think of them in an election. And you can forget about opinion polls. The only real opinion poll that counts is when people go to the ballot box and say what they really think about the parties on offer. And this party, this government, as I say, so unscrupulous, that is not prepared to put its head on the block, knowing full well that it's going to be chopped off.
No, they are extremely alarming. If you put a litany of all the things that they do, in sort of, bold print, black and white, points 1 to 10 on a piece of paper and handed it to someone, they'd think you were describing some sort of crazy Banana Republic regime. Let's talk about the fact that a load of cadets are being kicked out of their camp, Crowborough in East Sussex, where they've been using to do their sort of junior training in the armed forces, in order that it can be turned into a place to house 600 male migrants. Now, they've been told they've got to leave the camp because it might not be safe for them with these 600 undocumented men hanging around. And yet, perfectly safe for these men to just wander about in the local community. It's appalling.
Well, whatever happened to stop the votes, whatever happened to smash the gangs, we're seeing a new record almost certainly going to be set during the first full year of this government since the election, of small boat crossings and the number of people undocumented, uninvited, illegal, landing on our shores, never to be removed, or not at least as long as a Labour government is in power. And I think this is more than a little alarming. I think it's highly dangerous, not just to the social fabric of Britain, which is already being eroded as a result, but I think to the long-term rule of law and order, and indeed the democracy I mentioned a moment ago.
Yeah, I mean, talking about all the things that this government are doing, which if anyone else was doing it, if a hostile state was doing it, you would call it an act of warfare. Similarly, opening up our borders, allowing an invasion of people from hostile countries, by and large, to flood into small communities. This government is basically participating in the sort of tactic that China and Russia use to destabilise other countries, and they're just going along with it.
Yes, it is unfortunate that an elected government can't be tried for treason, because these people who are coming here illegally are being ferried across at the behest of the Soviet Union, the Russian Republic. As far as I'm concerned, there's not much difference between the two. Putin is using mass illegal immigration as a weapon against this Britain, against the fabric of its society. They know what they're doing. This is not an accident which is precipitated by the stupidity of the Blair government 20 years ago. This is a calculated maneuver by our enemies to destabilize our society, and it is working.
It's really working. And yet we never talk about that in the public. The Wagner mercenaries across swathes of Africa, toppling, well, they might be questionable, but otherwise democratically elected governments, replacing them, usually after military coups in order to seize assets, but then also to provoke the mass exodus of people out of the poorest parts of the world and into Europe. We've seen the coachloads of would-be illegal immigrants bust to the border of Belarus and Poland, rattling the fences. I mean, the Poles actually don't stand for it. They're there with their tear gas and, you know, massive chicken wire fences. They're not having it. Good for them. We never talk about the long arm of the Kremlin in all of that. We are talking about, however, the atrocious Salisbury poisoning, which often people forget that a perfectly innocent woman, Dawn Sturgis, ended up dying because a boyfriend had found what he thought was a bottle of perfume, discarded, and gave it to her as a gift. It turns out it was laced with the deadly nerve agent Novichok. And surprise, surprise, it turns out that Vladimir Putin himself personally ordered the Salisbury poisoning to demonstrate Russian strength around the world. Well, of course he did. So why is it that we can find our tongue on these issues, but when it comes to doing crazy things like, you know, concreting over our oil wells and therefore having to buy Russian gas third hand from people who are refining it on behalf of Putin, which funds his war machine, or tackling the illegal immigration that pays his Wagner mercenaries, but also enables him to destabilise this? Oh, we don't seem to be able to talk about that.
Well, the reason why is that we have a socialist government and a blob which actually enforces a new form of language in which certain words are not allowed. And if once you dictate the vocabulary, you dictate the terms of the debate. I mean, look, the whole thing involving the Novichok attack was a deliberate attempt to outrage the British public. We knew, our intelligence services knew from the outset, because Putin didn't in any way try to hide his tracks. Indeed, he used a sort of plutonium which was traceable from its origins right through the flight to Britain and right through its trip to Salisbury. So this was a blatant and flagrant attempt to intimidate Britain and tell us that they were out to get us, or out to get anyone who criticised the Kremlin regime.
No, indeed, that perfume bottle may as well have had on it "From Russia with Love." Trevor, I always love speaking to you. You are a hero in our nation, a veteran of our industry, one of the greatest journalists on this here planet. OK.